The Primatial Cathedral of St. Mary of Toledo, Spanish, Catedral Primada Santa María de Toledo, otherwise known as Toledo Cathedral, is a Catholic church in Toledo, Spain. It is the seat of the Metropolitan Archdiocese of Toledo. The Cathedral of Toledo is one of the three 13th-century High Gothic cathedrals in Spain and is considered, in the opinion of some authorities, to be the magnum opus of the Gothic style in Spain. It was begun in 1226 under the rule of Ferdinand III, and the last Gothic contributions were made in the 15th century, when, in 1493, the vaults of the central nave were finished during the time of the Catholic Monarchs. It was modeled after the Bourges Cathedral, although its five-naves plan is a consequence of the constructor's intention to cover all of the sacred space of the former city mosque with the cathedral, and of the former sahn with the cloister. It also combines some characteristics of the Mudéjar style, mainly in the cloister, with the presence of multifoiled arches in the triforium. The spectacular incorporation of light and the structural achievements of the ambulatory vaults are some of its more remarkable aspects. It is built with white limestone from the quarries of Olihuelas, near Toledo. It is popularly known as Dives Toletana, meaning the rich Tolden in Latin. The Mozarabic chapel in the Cathedral of Toledo still uses the Hispano-Mozarabic rite and music. History. Origins. The main facade, from the Plaza del Ayuntamiento. For many years, an unwritten popular tradition has held that there was originally a church from the era of the first Archbishop Eugene, St. Eugene of Toledo, located in the same place as the present cathedral. This church was consecrated for a second time in the year 587. After having undergone some alterations, as testified by a 16th-century inscription preserved on a pillar in the rear of the nave of the church, which states, "In the name of the Lord, the Church of St. Mary was consecrated as Catholic, the first day of the Ides of April, in the joyful first year of the reign of our most glorious King Flavius Reccared, era 625, 13 of April of 587. The city had been the episcopal seat of Visigothic Spain. The numerous councils of Toledo attest to its important ecclesiastical past. Also, the abjuration of Arianism on the part of Reccared occurred there. The Muslim invasion did not immediately eliminate the Christian presence, and the bishopric remained established in the Church of St. Mary of Alphazan. The Visigothic church was torn down, and the main mosque of the city of Toledo was erected in its place. Some investigators point out that the prayer hall of the mosque corresponds with the layout of the five naves of the current cathedral. The same would coincide with part of the current cloister and the chapel of St. Peter and the minaret with the bell tower. Using certain archaeological data, it is possible to discern an Islamic column mounted inside the chapel of St. Lucy. The marble shafts that decorate the exterior of the choir are an improvement of an old Muslim construction, and the intertwined arches of Caliphate style in the triforium of the main chapel and of the ambulatory coincide with the Muslim construction tradition of Cordova. The Cathedral of Alfonso VI. The city of Toledo was reconquered by Alfonso VI, King of Leon and Castile, in 1085. One of the points of the Muslim capitulation that made possible the transfer of the city without bloodshed was the king's promise to conserve and respect their institutions of higher learning, as well as the customs and religion of the Muslim population, which had coexisted with the larger Mozarabic population. Naturally, the preservation of the main mosque was integral to this compromise. Shortly thereafter, the king had to depart on matters of state, leaving the city in charge of his wife Constance and the abbot of the monastery of Sahagun, Bernard of Cederac or Bernard of Cluny, who had been elevated to the rank of Archbishop of Toledo. These two, in mutual accord and taking advantage of the absence of the king, undertook an unfortunate action which, as told by the priest Mariana in his General History of Spain, almost provoked a Muslim uprising and consequent ruin of the recently conquered city. On October 25, 1087, the Archbishop, in cooperation with Queen Constance, sent an armed contingent to seize the mosque by force. They proceeded to install a provisional altar and hung a bell in the minaret, following Christian custom to cast out the filthiness of the law of Muhammad. At 7, the priest Mariana writes that King Alfonso VI was so irritated by these events that neither the Archbishop nor the Queen were able to prevent him from ordering the execution of all the active participants. Legend tells that the local Muslim populace itself helped restore peace, with its chief negotiator, Faki Abu Walid, requesting the king to show mercy and imploring his fellow townsmen to accept the Christian usurpation as legitimate. In gratitude for this gesture, the cathedral chapter dedicated a homage to Walid and ordered his effigy to be placed on one of the pillars in the main chapel, in this way perpetuating his memory. 8. Thus the conversion of the Toledo Mosque was upheld, and it remained consecrated as a Christian cathedral. The building plans of the former mosque have not been preserved, nor is the appearance of the structure known, but taking into account the preserved vestiges of mosques in other Spanish cities, in Seville, Jaén, Granada, Malaga, and the Mosque Cathedral of Córdoba, it may be supposed that it was a columnary building, with horseshoe arcades on top of columns in revision of earlier Roman and Visigothic construction. It is possible that it appeared very much like the Church of the Savior of Toledo, previously a mosque. King Alfonso VI made important donations to the new church. On December 18, 1086, the cathedral was placed under the advocacy of María, and it was granted villas, hamlets, mills, and 1/3 of the revenues of all the rest of the churches of the city. The first royal privilege that is preserved is a prayer in English. I, Alphonsus, Emperor of Hisparia by the disposition of God, grant to the Metropolitan See, that is, the Church of St. Mary in the city of Toledo, the complete honor that she should have the pontifical see according to what before was constituted by the Holy Fathers. Pope Urban II recognized this church in 1088 as the Primatial Cathedral over the rest of the kingdom. The Mosque Cathedral remained intact until the 13th century, when in the year 1222 a papal bull issued by the Pope authorized the construction of a new cathedral, which was begun in 1224 or 1225. The official ceremony of the laying of the foundation stone took place in 1226, other sources say 1227, with the presence of King Ferdinand II. Throughout the 13th century, the cathedral's income tax was raised through the previous incorporation of Alcalá de Henares into its archiepiscopal territories in 1129. The Cathedral of the Archbishop Jiménez de Rada. The layout of the cathedral as now seen was set in the 13th century, while Rodrigo Jiménez de Rada was Archbishop of Toledo and during the reign of a young Ferdinand III of Castile. Commencement of the work was delayed until the king could be present at the official ceremonial cornerstone laying, 1227. Jiménez de Rada was elected Bishop of Toledo in 1209, and thenceforth he defended the primacy of the Toledan see before the papal authority. He aimed to build a grand cathedral, worthy of the city he governed. When he came to office, the Mosque Cathedral had ample space, but with a low roof, making the interior noisy. The cathedral was aged, some sections had been demolished by his predecessor, and the structure lacked the slenderness and height of other religious edifices of similar importance. Jiménez de Rada became the enthusiastic promoter for a new cathedral, to be built in contemporary Gothic style. He was so enthusiastic about the project and involved himself so much in it that it was later falsely rumored that he was the designer-architect of the cathedral. The archbishop spent a few years maintaining and reinforcing the old structure in hopes that his dream would be realized. The building plan of the cathedral. The structure of the building is greatly influenced by the French Gothic style of the 13th century, but adapted to Spanish taste. It measures 120 meters, 390 feet, in length by 59 meters, 194 feet, in width and 44.5 meters, 146 feet, high. It consists of 5 naves with transept and double ambulatory. The outer naves present an odd anomaly in being a little wider than the other two. The oldest part of the building is the sanctuary, which maintains in its architecture the original triforia that extended along the length of the naves and were removed in one of the many alterations that the cathedral underwent. Still in the Gothic period, these triforia were replaced with large stained glass windows. Those triforia that survive in the sanctuary are of Mudéjar influence. The lowest section is made of cusped arches that rest on paired columns, and the upper section presents interlaced arches typical of Mudéjar. It is not known if these Mudéjar themes existed in the previous mosque and were copied as a reminder, or if they were added in one of the improvements of the stonework as something original and tasteful. In the sanctuary, one encounters the double ambulatory, which is doubled as would correspond to a ground plan of 5 naves. This double ambulatory is of grand proportions and is enriched with architectural elements and an original vaulting. The new sections of the chapels were resolved with alternate plans of rectangles and triangles, which allowed for each chapel to be of a different size, rectangular plans being larger and triangular plans smaller. This method of distributing the sanctuary can be seen in the French cathedrals of Paris, Bourges, and Le Mans, the last cathedral being the most similar in appearance, although the three are more slender in aspect than the Spanish cathedral. The various reforms that were made over time altered the arrangement of some of the chapels. For example, in one case, just one chapel was reconstructed in the former space of 3. The vaults of the naves are quadripartite except for those of the transept and the chancel, which are reinforced with tiercerons. The master builders and their patrons. The cathedral seen from the church of San Ildefonso. For centuries it was held with complete certainty that the first master architect of the Cathedral of Toledo was Petrus Petri, Spanish, Pedro Perez. Such certainty was based on the only existing testimony regarding the authorship, a legend inscribed in vulgar Latin still visible on a tombstone. English translation: Petrus Petri, deceased in 1291, master of the Church of St. Mary of Toledo, whose fame was propagated by his good examples and customs, who constructed this temple and rests here. For what an admirable building he made! He will not feel the wrath of God. Towards the middle of the 20th century, the Bishop of Ciudad Real thoroughly investigated this claim and brought to light a series of documents which demonstrated the existence of a first master prior to Petrus Petri, called Master Martin, married to María Gomez and certainly of French origin, who had been summoned by Jiménez de Rada. One of the documents is dated to 1227 and names a Master Martin of the work of St. Mary of Toledo. Another document lists income collected by the cathedral in 1234 and records again the name of Master Martin of the work, of whom it is also written that he was a tenant of a house associated with the cathedral. In later writings there appear the names of Martin, stonemason, and Juan Martin, master of stonemasons, who are believed to be relatives of each other. No new documents have appeared, so at present this Master Martin is accredited as the first architect. To this argument it must be added that the date of the beginning of construction does not correlate with the age of Petrus Petri, who during those years must have been too young to be an architect. Studies released after this discovery indicate that the Master Martin would be the designer of the chapels of the ambulatory, and upon his departure by death, or by absence the supervision of the work was taken up by Master Petrus, who finished the ambulatories and constructed the triforia in Tolden style. Towards the end of the 20th century, the sanctuary and 2 sections of the naves of the south side were completed. Near the end of the 14th century, the existence of a Master Rodrigo Alfonso is apparently documented. He laid the first stone of the cloister in 1389, under the patronage of Archbishop Pedro Tenorio, who died 10 years later. The archbishop occupied himself with many works of the cathedral, such as the chapel of St. Blaise in the cloister, which is famous for the artistic richness of its frescoes from the school of Siena. The next master of whom there is information was Alvar Martinez, in some sources called Gonzalez, who was quantity surveyor of the Olihuelas limestone quarries at the boundary of Olias del Rey. He is the designer of the west façade, whose construction was begun in 1418. Changes made in 1787 obscure the original appearance of this façade. He was also the designer of the only tower of the cathedral, which was built during the office of Archbishop Juan Martínez de Contreras, whose coat of arms appears in the frieze that crowns the first section. The crowning of the tower was done by another great master sculptor, the Fleming Hanneken de Bruselas, who molded the coat of arms of the succeeding Archbishop Juan de Sarazuela. With Hanneken came a group of illustrious masters, Agás Cuman de Bruselas' brother, citation needed, Enrique Agás, and Juan Guas. These worked on facades, chapels, and sumptuary works, completing the work done in the Gothic idiom with their labor. The vaults at the footing of the central nave were closed in 1493, under the direction of Juan Guas and Enrique Agás, with the patronage and supervision of Cardinal Mendoza, great patrons of the 16th century. Works and artists: Cardinal Ximenes de Cisneros, During the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, various modifications were made to the cathedral according to the new styles. Architectural works including magnificent portals and chapels, and sumptuous works of sculpture and painting. The 16th century was the golden age of Toledo, which consequently came to be called the Imperial City. The best informed and most active patrons lived during this century. It was the archbishop governors who, in the absence of the kings, attended to the city and added to its magnificence. In 1493, at the end of the 15th century, Cardinal Mendoza supervised the closing of the last vault of the cathedral and expressed in his will his desire to be buried in the presbytery. In the first decade of the 16th century, the cenotaph was built in Renaissance style. This work is attributed to a team working under the leadership of Domenico Fancelli. Although some authorities attribute it to Andrea Sansovino. Cardinal Cisneros occupied the cardinalate office for 22 years. Under his influence and sponsorship important works were done. Perhaps the most important was the Mozarabic Chapel, realized by masters of the stature of Juan Francis Regia, or the ironwork screen of the Mozarabic Chapel. Enrique Agas, Juan de Borgona, paintings of the Mozarabic Chapel, and its Grandmaster Pedro de Gumiel. Cisneros also ordered the magnificent main altarpiece to be built, the work of Diego Capon de Holanda, and the high cloister for the canonical community, plus the library. He was followed by Guillermo de Croy, the chief of the Spanish treasury, Contador Mayor, who never resided in Toledo. Alfonso de Fonseca y Acevedo, who had been Archbishop of Santiago de Compostela, was the promoter of the new King's Chapel, which was planned by the architect Alonso de Covarrubias. Paintings by Mariano Salvador Maella were added in the 18th century. With the ascent of Bishop Juan Tavera, the Tolden Renaissance reached its height of splendor. Under his governance, the choir of Alonso Barragán and Felipe Vigani, the interior facades of the transept, the chapel of St. John, or of the treasure and other facades and adornments were constructed. During Archbishop Juan Martinez Silicio's time in office, the cathedral was adorned with the screen of the main chapel, the work of Francisco de Villalpando. Cardinal Gaspar de Quiroga was responsible for the architectural complex of the Chapel of the Tabernacle, the reliquary, and the courtyard and house of the treasurer. The renderings and plans were drawn by the Grandmaster Nicolas de Vergara El Mozo. To construct this complex, the Hospital of the King was torn down and rebuilt on its former site. These works were carried out under the supervision of Cardinal Bernardo de Sandoval y Rojas and the architect Nicolas de Vergara in the 17th century. Exterior. Main facade and the great portals. Puerta del Perdón, Portal of Forgiveness. The main facade faces an irregular square containing the town hall and the Archbishop's palace. To the left is the bell tower, and to the right the projecting Mozarabic Chapel that occupies the place where the second tower was to be built. To the left of the main facade rises the only tower of the cathedral. The dome that is seen to the right belongs to the Mozarabic Chapel, which was commissioned by Cardinal Cisneros. The tower has two parts. The lower part, of square cross-section, was designed by Alvar Martinez. The upper, octagonal part was designed by Hannequin de Brazilas. It is topped by a spire. The main facade has three portals, known as, respectively, Puerta del Perdón, Portal of Forgiveness, in the center, Puerta del Juicio Final, Portal of the Last Judgment, to the right, and Puerta del Infierno, Portal of Hell, to the left. The Portal of Forgiveness belongs to the 15th century. It was begun under the direction of Alvar Martinez in 1418. It is so called because indulgences were granted to penitents who entered through it. These days it is always closed, and is used only on special occasions and upon the investiture of new archbishops of the Primatial Cathedral. It has one great arch, with 6 Gothic archivolts. The decoration consists of typical Gothic iconography, with the figure of the Savior in the mullion and in apostolates in the jambs. In the tympanum, the Virgin gives the chasuble to Saint Ildefonsus, a particularly special theme for the cathedral, which is repeated in the interior in the chapels and paintings. The leaves of the doors measure more than 5 meters in height and are covered by elaborately fashioned bronze plates, which date to the 14th century. The Portal of the Last Judgment is the oldest of the three, and represents, as its name suggests, the Last Judgment. The portal of hell, in contrast, does not contain figurative motifs, only floral decoration. It is also known as the Portal of the Tower, or of the Palms, as it used to be reserved as an entrance for the procession of the Palms on Palm Sunday. Puerta del Reloj, Portal of the Clock. The facade was modified in 1787 by the architect Eugenio Durango under the orders of Cardinal Lorenzana. The sculptor was Mariano Salvatierra. The work was necessary because of the deterioration of the stone, which was not of good quality. It is possible that the portals were to be moved forward between buttresses instead of their current position, but this is not known for certain. Portal of the Clock. The Portal of the Clock is the oldest of the portals, begun in the 14th century and located in the facade of the north side. In addition, it is also known as Portal of the Fair, because it opened to the street where the fair was celebrated. Portal of the Chapinaria, shoemaker shop, because it fronts the street which bears that name, the place where clogs were made and sold. Portal of the Alas, because in its decoration some alas can be seen. Portal of the Monarchs, alluding to the iconography of its sculpture. Portal of the Lost Boy, also because of the iconography. The tympanum is divided into 4 horizontal panels, in which there are scenes from the life of Christ, the Annunciation, the Nativity, the Adoration of the Magi, the Massacre of the Innocents, the Flight into Egypt, the Circumcision of Jesus, the Finding in the Temple, the Presentation of Jesus at the Temple, the Baptism and the Marriage at Cana. In the upper part of the tympanum, the death of the Virgin is depicted. The column mullion is decorated with an image of the Virgin and Child. In the jambs are images of kings and saints, all of which are the work of the sculptor Juan Alemán, who also worked on the Portal of the Lions. Above this portal is found the later sculpting of Gregorio López Durango, whose work is also seen on the main facade. It is consolidation work that was needed because of the deteriorated state of the stone. The central intercolumniation above the portal is occupied by the face of the clock that gives it its name. The portal and its surrounding stonework form an appealing space, with the entranceway enclosed by a Gothic screen. This is the work of Juan Francis, with very plain crosspieces, a small, carved frieze with a separation in the center, and a simple and harmonious design. Interior. Inside are diverse medallions. The best are those of the Virgin of the Annunciation by Nicolas de Vergara, El Mozo, and of the Archangel Saint Gabriel by Juan Bautista Vasquez. It is also adorned with paintings and coats of arms. Above is the rose window of the 13th century that contains the oldest stained glass of the cathedral. Portal of the Lions. Puerta de los Leones, Portal of the Lions. The Portal of the Lions was built in the 15th and 16th centuries. It is the most modern of the great portals. It is so named because of the lions that surmount the columns of the gate that encloses the small entranceway. In addition, it has 2 other names. New Portal, for being the last that was built. Portal of Joy, in allusion to the celebration of the Assumption of the Virgin that is represented in the face of the back wall, over the archivolts. It was constructed between the years 1460 and 1466 under the mandate of Archbishop Alfonso Carrillo de Acuña, with designs from Hannequin of Brussels, also known as Anakin de Egascuman, 13 and Enrique de Egascuman, his son, 14 in collaboration with the Flemish sculptors Pedro and Juan Guaz and Juan Alemán, designer of the Apostolate. These artists supervised a large workshop that included prestigious stonemasons and carvers. The statuary of this portal is one of the best Hispano-Flemish assemblages of the 15th century, above all the Virgin of the column mullion and the statues of the jambs. The cherubim and musical angels that accompany the ascension of Mary to the sky are works of art executed with great delicacy. The facade was altered by Durango and Salvatierra, the same as in the other portals, to enhance the appearance of the building. The bronze leaves of the doors are the work of Francisco de Villalpando, who created a masterpiece on the 35 panels or plates. They are hidden from view, protected with wood panels. On top is the great rose window of polychromatic stained glass. The interior of the portal corresponds to the great facade of the transept on its southern side, on top of which rests the small balcony with balustrade that corresponds to the tribune where the organ of the emperor is located. Higher up is the rose window, surrounded by a frame with its pendentives decorated with rosettes. In the lower part of the great facade is the portal divided by a column mullion. Above the doors are the tympanum sculpted with themes of the genealogy of the Virgin whose designers were the same who worked on the exterior of this portal. On top of the tympanum is the plateresque carving with a great medallion of the coronation of the Virgin in the center, the work of Gregorio Pardo, eldest son of Felipe Vigorni. On both sides are the statues of David and Solomon, attributed to Esteban Jamit. To the right and left of this front are two sepulchres. The one on the right is empty. It is believed that it was prepared to receive the remains of Brother Bartolomé Carranza. That of the left holds the remains of Canon Alfonso de Rojas, represented in a praying statue. The bronze Regia metalwork screen was made a century after the great screens of the main chapel and of the choir, in a style completely different from these, valuing solidity and utility more than the taste for ornamentation of the previous century. Its designer was Juan Alvarez de Molina, a native of Ubeda, Jaén, who made the screen in the city of Toledo in 1647. The documents preserved in regard to this say that the master metalsmith received 8,504 reals and 12 maravedis, in addition to the 27,000 reals that had been given to him earlier. The document gives account of the cost of the metal employed, which was nearly as much as the total payment he received for the work. Other portals and facades of the cathedral. Level portal. The level portal is of neoclassical style, built in 1800. It is the only entrance to the cathedral that is level with the ground, without steps, so giving it its name. It was customary for processions to exit through this portal. Facade of St. Catherine. The facade of St. Catherine is of late Gothic style. Its archivolts are carved with vegetal motifs of leaves and foliage. The pillar that makes the mullion is splendidly carved on its side faces, with castles and lions. In its interior, it has two sections. The higher section is ornamented with a series of statues with small dossals. Portal of the Presentation. The Portal of the Presentation is from the time of Cardinal Tavera. It is richly carved with imagery of miniatures in good quality. Very white stone. Tower. Tower of the Cathedral. The original plan was to build two symmetric towers on each side of the west facade, but when the one at the northern corner was raised, it was discovered that the ground beneath the site plan for the southern tower was unstable due to an underground water stream. Even so, the Mozarabic chapel was later built there. The tower was designed and built mostly by Alvar Martinez. It is Gothic, with some decorative Mudéjar influence, and reaches a height of 92 meters, 301 feet. For levels, and a fifth of lesser height rise on a square elevated base which houses the chapel of the Treasury. Between the first and the second level a frieze of black marble unfolds horizontally, with the coat of arms of Archbishop Juan Martinez de Contreras, whose mandate was from 1422 until 1438, inlaid in white marble. Master Martinez completed this part of the work in 1422, but left no plans or drawings for construction of the pinnacle and its spire. This top level of the tower, with its octagonal body, was designed by the architect Hanakin de Brasilas, who was summoned to finish its construction with a group of accomplished masters, Egas Cuman, Enrique Egas, and Juan Guaz among others. The pinnacle with its buttressed arches rests on the octagonal barrel of the fifth level and is topped with a spire that supports three crowns imitating a papal tiara. Interior. Looking down the main chapel. Main chapel. Interior of the cathedral. The main chapel of the cathedral brings together a wealth of artwork, starting with the architecture of the enclosure itself. In its original state, the enclosure was separated into two parts, with two independent vaults. The polygonal vault pertained to the chapel of the old monarchs, which was somewhat separated. With this arbitrary division, the presbytery was improperly narrow for such a grand cathedral. Cardinal Cisneros insisted that he wanted this part of the cathedral to be rebuilt, and despite some resistance from the chapel chapter, he finally received its consent to demolish the old chapel and build one with a wider presbytery and sufficient space for the great Gothic retable, which he himself had commissioned. Also in its original state, the chapel had been enclosed laterally by two magnificent screens of stone, which were like enormous gates. The pulpit, or gospel side of the church, with its screen, was demolished to make room for the sepulchre of Cardinal Mendoza. The lectern, or epistle side, remains as it was, and by this it can be deduced that it was part of a larger work. Some art critics, 15, assure us that this stone screen is the most beautiful part of the cathedral. It is possible that its construction was completed during the tenure of Archbishop Pedro de Luna, whose polychromatic shield and coat of arms of Castile and Leon are displayed here. It is adorned with abundant statuary, including a sculpted choir of angels that appear to be flying. The two pillars that form the passage to the interior of the chapel were built to harmonize with this work of fretted stone. On the left pillar is a statue of Martin al-Hajja, the famous shepherd who, according to legend, led King Alfonso VIII of Castile through the Despinaperos Pass in the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. The other pillar is called Fakia's Pillar after its statue of Abu Walid, who brought King Alfonso VI a message of tolerance. See this section. The whole sanctuary is covered with carved and chiseled mythological figures of all sizes. On the pulpit side are the beautifully decorated sepulchres of Alfonso VII and Dona Berenguela with their recumbent statues, while on the lectern side are the tombs of Sancho III of Castile, the Desired, and Sancho IV the Brave. The images of the monarchs were carved in wood by